and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues. On this show, there are no face-offs, there are no political clashes, but a conversation of ideas. Ideas which are essential for India. This week, we look at food for all. Can it actually end hunger in our country? Does it not go far enough, as some have said? Does it go way too far? Is this a cost India should welcome, or is it a cost which will damage India beyond repair? Joining me tonight, Sitaram Yechury, Abhishek Singhvi, Piyush Goyal and Dr. Arvind Panagria. Mr. Yechury, can this bill actually end hunger in a country where over 40% of children are malnourished?
Well, it will not end, and I think it's a little below what I would have wanted, for instance. But it is definitely a beginning. It will take place. When I would have, actually wanted a greater quantity, a greater coverage, and a lesser price. These are the three amendments which we'll be moving when it comes to the Parliament. But nevertheless, it is something, a step in the right direction. But we would want to push it to be able to achieve what all of us would want, that there is food for all. And malnutrition that you mentioned, the Prime Minister is on record to say that this is a national shame. I mean, the levels of malnutrition in children. Now, to address this problem, yes, first primary concern is availability of food, but it should lead up to availability of the required nutritional levels and at affordable prices.
But when the left says universal entitlements, the worry, of course, is that what about people who don't deserve these entitlements? How much are we propounding a theory of free food for all? Is this a route to disaster?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, it's not now, but when we were students way back in the 60s and 70s, we had economists who were telling, unfortunately in India, if you want to give enough for the poor, you end up giving more than enough for the rich. I mean, unless you do that, you don't give enough for the poor. So you have to have a system by which those who don't need it, those deserve it, I mean, they will not access it. But even if they were to access it, I mean, if you have a situation where food is available to all, what will they do? There won't be a black market for them to sell in. I mean, if you have that sort of a situation. So I don't think that will be a problem at all. That won't ever happen. And I don't think we're going too far. I mean, there's nothing, what do you mean by can we afford it? I mean, who will afford it? Whom are we talking about? When we are talking about we the people, then what the people need is elimination of hunger, one of the things, important things they need. So of course, we have to afford it. There's no other way.
So let me actually turn that question on its head. Professor Panagria, if you come in on that point, forget about whether India can afford the food security bill. Can we afford the unacceptably high levels of hunger in our country? You've actually challenged that whole theory completely. You said even the figures of hunger are wrong.
What I wrote about was child nutrition, and that's a separate debate. We could actually go that route. But even on this particular issue, I have a very different view than what Mr. Yechury has said. Now, hunger, let's say, is there. I mean, so, what I've challenged is the actual numbers anyway on even malnutrition. I'm not saying there's no malnutrition. There's an enormous amount of malnutrition, and a lot of effort is required. But that's, as I said, a separate debate. Now, on this, let's take Chhattisgarh. Everybody says that's a huge success in terms of already implementing in the PDS what the food security bill is trying to do. Compare at any income level the consumption levels of cereals in Chhattisgarh to those, let's say, in Maharashtra. They are lower than Maharashtra at every income level. Just because you give subsidized food, or let's say even free food, to people in certain quantity, which is in this case 5 kilograms per person per month, doesn't mean that they will consume more. Where the real problem is, which nobody seems to want to focus on, is milk, eggs, fruits and vegetables. Milk consumption, you go to the bottom 30%, about 1 to 2 kilograms per month. Go to the top 30%, 7 to 8 kilograms per month. You go to Haryana, of course, it's way more, goes to 20 kilograms per month. That is where the big difference is. What is this food security bill going to do for that consumption? And you want balanced diet. The problem is the people are, it's not an issue of whether they're getting enough to eat, but whether they're getting a balanced diet. We have done nothing here.
So you're saying it's misconceived on what it actually aims to do, but Chhattisgarh, I want to bring Piyush Goyal in there, because Chhattisgarh has really been looked upon as the BJP's success. Many of the objections made have cited the Chhattisgarh model as well. In fact, Professor Amartya Sen has also praised the Chhattisgarh model, though he didn't entirely praise the Gujarat model. Do you agree with what Professor Panagra has raised at a point? And one interesting aspect also is that on this food security bill, how the BJP often is talking the language of the left, so many divisions seem to have gone completely.
See, you must realize we are in a country where poverty is there. There's no denying it. And there is malnutrition. There are people who are not getting 2 square meals a day. So there can be no denying that we do need to provide for their security. And in that respect, already there were enough laws. We had the Essential Commodities Acts for many years. We had the public distribution system, and subsequently the targeted public distribution system, which has been prevailing for years and years. Earlier they used to give 10 kilograms per household. It was increased to 25, subsequently to 35. So if you look at the country today, we already had 35 kilograms of food grain going to the poor and even people above the poverty line, that was the APLs, to about 82 crore people. It is existing. In terms of distribution, that model actually the Planning Commission themselves have acknowledged. The Supreme Court suggested to the government, why don't you have a look at it? And there's no politics in it. If something good, for example, on insurance, Andhra Pradesh did wonderfully, the health insurance. I tell all my chief ministers, why don't you learn from that? So it's not about which state did it. Yes. But the fact is that, and I have a book here which describes how they did it. It's beautifully done, involved the local people, and they've managed to actually eliminate leakages. It's the lowest cost TPDS in the country per capita. But that apart, I'm saying the system already is there. 61 million tons of food grain have been procured in 2012-13, as against 54.9 million envisaged in the food security bill. So really the food security bill, neither does it involve any additional outlay in terms of money. 10,000 crores is what Mr. Chidambaram has provided, and Mr. K.V. Thomas in our house on 1 week ago has confirmed that. So really this is only about converting an entitlement into a right. So I think the discourse in the nation about the cost, the fiscal deficit, the potential cost to the nation, deteriorating conditions is really wrong. This is no cost additional, it's existing cost being repackaged. And in that sense, it's nothing for the economists to be worried about. I only hope a little less politics was played around it, because of which all this, you see all the discourse, you see all the attacking, then you go all the way, as Sitaram is saying, that why not 100% of the people, and all those other issues. I think if there was less politics around it, and if it was recognized only as an entitlement, existing entitlement being converted to a right, then I think there was nothing wrong. It's good to give the people a right to food.
But leaving aside the politics part you mentioned, your former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha has gone on record to say, I disagree slightly, I feel this will be a fiscal disaster. And many economists, economists who are not left of centre, have pointed to the fact that we felt the BJP, at least with Mr. Modi, talking the language of that we need a different language, a language of the markets, a language of growth, that on the food security bill, you'll have talked a very different language.
Well, we have talked the language of, in fact, if you talk, let's say the bill says the right to nutrition. So we flagged off the issue that nutrition is not going to be satisfied to some extent, as Dr. Panagri has said, only by these two items, rice and wheat and coarse grain. It needs much more. So Chhattisgarh, for example, gives 1 kilo of free salt. They give some amount of dal. So they've added a few things to make it a little more wholesome. Milk is an excellent idea Dr. Panagri just gave. I think some thought could be given to some such new out-of-the-box ideas. But our attack has not been per se that you don't give food security. Obviously you have to. Our issues were more on what is food security. Does it adequately provide nutrition to the below poverty line? And then of course some amount of politics is going to play out once any such move.
Dr. Singhvi, the main criticisms of this bill are well known, but the focus really, and I think with the events this week, especially of the rupee and how it's fallen, comes back to that issue. We can look at it and whether India can afford not to have it, but let's look at the real aspects of if the economy, if the rupee is crashing, where will you find the money from to fund an ambitious bill like this. Piyush Goyal says, look, it won't be much more, but there are other views. You've heard Surjit Bhalla and others argue that it would be as high as 3% of the GDP.
So let's just step back for a moment and just consider the first issue is the need. Is there a need for it? Now, I don't think anybody can deny that some form of food security in a formal, consolidated, legally entitled form should be there in this country. And I think I largely agree with my friend Mr. Piyush Goyal's point that even assuming that it was mere consolidation, which it is not, there's something more than mere consolidation, but a large part of this initiative is consolidation. That itself is a sufficient virtue by itself, because to tie up innumerable programs into one act, secondly, for the first time ever, to give a legal right to demand it, to go to a redressal officer, to go and appeal to a district officer, to go to a magistrate, to have a food allowance if you can't get food, to have a penalty, to have a fine, to have other coercive steps, is a huge change in mindset. So I think the need you have to then consider whether you at all need it. Secondly, there are a huge number of contradictions in some of the criticisms. Now, he very rightly said that it is largely a consolidation. The finance minister has done the maths and says 10,000. The real maths is about 23,800 crores, because 1,25,000 crores, 1,25,000 crores will involve an additional expenditure of 23,800 crores.
Oh, but it went up another 5,000 because you'll have raised states entitlements just last week.
Let's assume within 30,000. I mean,
Okay,
this math is changing because somebody
yeah.
goes to 67%, but
Yeah.
say, let's say 30,000 crores. So the question is, in this country, if you're having virtually a revolutionary new thing in terms of guaranteed legally entitled food security, can this country turn its nose up and say it is not affordable for 30,000 crores? And it is over a period of time. Look, such legislations, Sonia, are always work in progress. They are never a finished product. You will always have, and I am the first to admit, huge drawbacks. Who says not? But many of these drawbacks in a cause and effect mixture get removed as you go on. You know, in Manrega, even their worst critics today accept that the 70% fault level is now down to by at least 50% or 70%. People, when Manrega started, had very serious problems. It has improved considerably. Now, in this case, I think we should not cavil on the nitty-gritty. Nutrition is a vital part, but the fact that there is leakage in this country, the fact that food grains rot, the fact that we don't have rakes, the fact that our distribution system is faulty, why do you blame the food security bill for that? No. You will in fact end up improving all those four things once you have the food security bill. But I have the figures, Sonia, and I am quite astonished that this whole argument about rotting food grains, which sounds terrible when you read the press. Of course it's terrible, you know, so many thousand tons rotted. The percentages of rotting have come down dramatically over the years of rotting food grains.
It's and they are now 44,000 crores according to Sharad
No, but look at the figures in terms of quantum. I have the figures here from 2007-8 when it was 0.34 lakh tons damaged. It is now down to 0.03 lakh tons in 2012-13, and I have each year's figures.
But 44,000 crores.
Look, I'm not on the value part of the quantum part.
No, the quantum and value are different. She's talking of fruits, vegetables, everything.
Exactly. I'm talking of food grains because we are concerned in this food security with only food grains. Now, you know, these things are there. They are part of a systemic culture and a structural problem in this country. But once you have a fine and a grievance cell, let me tell you, we already have a storage program. We have now done some 70 lakh additional quintals out of a 210 target. With this impetus, it is the best impetus to build that as well, faster and quicker. We will have rakes. The point is, you can't throw the baby out of the bathwater. I mean, the bathwater may be dirty, but the baby is still a shining example of goodness. So you need to be careful in your criticism.
No, but Dr. Singh, we have it both ways. In one instance, Mr. Yechury, we had the newly released poverty figures, which were touted as saying that India has eliminated a large number. Look at how much we've come down. We've dropped by 15% in poverty. Yet we find that we want to give food security to 67% of the population in rural areas. Isn't there a contradiction?
There is none at all, because I don't think you've got to bring in any contrast with the poverty figures. I mean, please don't bring that in because they're extremely disputable. On that, there's a lot of controversy that's going on even within the government itself, between the Planning Commission and everybody else, and the ridiculous levels at which you are maintaining poverty. For instance, let's take one basic fact.
Poverty is not a food deficit.
No.
Food deficit, poverty are not synonymous at all.
No, but most of the spending was going on food. Most of the spending on this poverty line figures were going on food.
No, but
deprivation figure also.
Poverty, let's say, even if you take the most minimal of the requirements, it is estimated to be 21,000 in urban areas, 22,000 in rural areas of calories. What is intake of calories? You know, if you're going by that measure, poverty is not fallen. If you're going by, your statistics and the Tendulkar committee and the figures that you've worked out, that's a different matter. I don't think we should enter into that debate. The point at issue is not that, whatever be the percentage levels, we have a certain commitment, we in the sense the government of India and the authorities in India, have a certain commitment, whoever is there in power, have a certain commitment of eliminating hunger from our country. It has been a promise of our national movement and of our entire freedom struggle that this will be a country post-independence where nobody will suffer from hunger. Now what we are trying to aim at is to achieve that purpose. From that you have to build on, to achieve a proper healthy population. To achieve that purpose also, I mean, what our criticism, for example, of the world would be that it is a little halting. I mean, we have not gone all the way that we could have gone or we should have gone. And one criticism that you're pointing out in terms of the availability of funds. Now, for instance, I mean, you see, the funds availability always has to be seen in the macro picture. Now, if you want to take the macro picture, I mean, let's say, I'll give you one other example. I mean, it won't be a holistic thing. For instance, in the last 3 years, if you go, the tax foregone by the economy has been to the tune of 5 lakhs crore plus. Last year, your tax foregone is 50,000 crores more than your entire fiscal deficit. Now, your tax foregone, if you're not foregone, there's no fiscal deficit. Okay, in that tax foregone, maybe even if you take 50% cannot be recovered. Even if 50% can be recovered, that is about 2.5 lakh crores. What are we talking about? Per annum. I'm talking per annum. You're talking about 30,000 crores now, 23,000 odd crores now. Now, you have given those tax concessions as incentives for corporate sector industry. As a result of these incentives in the last 3 years, now you have minus 1.6% is your growth in your your industrial production, growth index, minus 1.6. What incentives? And now you talk of the fiscal problem. It's a fiscal disaster. You use that word somewhere.
Mr. Yashwant Sinha used that. I'm quoting him.
Okay. You say it's going to be a fiscal disaster. Now, if you have this sort of money, which has gone into incentives, now incentives for the corporates and the rich are incentives for growth. These are nothing but subsidies. These are nothing but subsidies for the rich, but the subsidies for the poor are burden for you. No, hang on.
Yes.
There is a certain mindset involved in it. Now, that is what I said. If you give incentives and what you call stimulus packages, subsidies for the corporate sector, the rich, those are good for the economy, but subsidies for the poor are bad. Now, that is where I think we have to come to terms with a certain reality. And this I'm saying not because of left or big communists or anything, but I think many more creative minds in the world are now come to that conclusion, what we've been saying for a long time. For instance, Joseph Stiglitz, in his latest book, he titles it The Price of Inequality. Now, you will have all sorts of viewpoints, but the point is that even inequality and poverty, there's an economic price. It's not only a humanitarian question. There's an economic price you're paying. And the economic price is the greater the inequality, the lower the growth. Now, that has been established today. I mean, not by left alone, or by the right of the right, in terms of the economy. Now, therefore, let us come to terms with certain realities. That eliminating inequality, for which eliminating hunger is the minimum, is the basis,
yes,
is an absolute economic requirement.
In fact, that's what interests me, that Dr. Panagra, as Mr. Yachty just said, even the right of the right, that on this, there's complete unanimity amongst all political parties on it. That's why I think this is one of the few
Sonia,
bills that actually got through.
Yeah, Sonia, let me address first.
Election timing?
First, your immediate question. I don't think it's election timing. When it comes to these rights and benefits for the poor, nobody can say no. You can keep expanding these social programs. You started with education, you started with food, you do that, go to health, and then, once we get there, go to giving people houses, go to giving people two-wheelers or an automobile at the expense of the exchequer. I think people will have very difficult time, or political parties will have a very difficult time.
Well, you already have petroleum and LPG subsidies, which are also seen. Professor Amartya Sen has pointed to those subsidies.
No, let me come to you, but we haven't cut them. We haven't cut them. Right?
No, that's his point, exactly. Yeah. We don't cut those, so why are you against these?
No. But the point is that this is the difficulty. This is the difficulty. You can keep expanding the programs. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the party in power to be careful before they put these subsidize these programs on the table. Once you put them on the table, No political parties has guts to say that I am against food security, I am against right to education, I am against right to health, I am against right to such and such. Ultimately, your resources are limited, somewhere you'll have to stop. But let me get to a few other things that have been said around this table, which I have very different view on. First of all, inequality. So Kerala in India is the most unequal state. Bihar is the most equal state. Where do you think people are migrating from, and where to? From Bihar to Kerala, not from Kerala to Bihar. So to think that inequality is the worst problem, you got to worry about the levels of income. And there is no such, Mr. Yechury says that somehow more inequality means less growth. That's simply not true actually. The richest country in America. It can go either way. It can go either way, but there is no clear, strong relationship economically one or the other way. But I can point to you, you got America, which is the richest country, or one of the richest countries anyway. It is highly unequal, much more unequal than India is.
No, the point is
it is my time. Just a minute.
I'll give you a chance to rebut that right after this.
But no, so that's part of it. Now come to these regressive subsidies. Of course, we should eliminate them. But who is eliminating them? Isn't that the responsibility of the ruling party? We should eliminate the fertilizer subsidy, the water subsidy, the diesel subsidy, the petroleum subsidy, the cooking gas subsidy. Most of the beneficiaries are the richer ones. I mean, even on fertilizer, it's the large farmers who get those subsidies. It's not the small little farmer or the landless worker who is getting that subsidy. So we should eliminate them. Why are they not doing it? Why does the government not do it? Everybody says, Amartya Sen says, oh, if we give subsidies to these, why not? What's wrong with this? No, nothing wrong with this. Yes, we should do it. But are we cutting those subsidies? So let us be responsible. Finally, on empowerment. I mean, we say that, oh, we are empowering the poor man. You think the poor man is able to actually go in and fend for himself or herself? I mean, he is or she is at the mercy of the PDS shopkeeper. With all the corruption that's going on, you go to the shopkeeper says, sorry, the wheat did not get delivered or rice did not get delivered, I haven't got it. Give him cash, give the money that you are trying to spend, give it to the poor fellow directly. He will then get empowered, he will then call shots that, look, it is my money, I'm going to spend it. If you, the PDS shopkeeper, cannot give me the food, I'll go to the private guy. We ran that experiment in Delhi recently, and where the cash transfers were given, actually the PDS shop behavior and the availability of food suddenly improved, because they knew that they have to now compete against the private providers.
I'm going to just let Mr. Yechury rebut on that specific point, and then I'm going to take this whole issue of empowerment. But Mr. Yechury, go ahead. You wanted to say something.
The point, it's not a question of richness and inequality. The question is that of course, I mean the most unequal societies also are the richest societies. And they are rich because of the inequality. I mean, because of the hang on. The potential for growth, Mr. Panigrahi, Professor, I mean, after all, I thought we would discuss it a little seriously. They could have grown more if this inequality was less than what they have grown. It's not the question of saying, now today they are a rich country, but they have inequality. Therefore, inequality has got nothing to do with the growth. Or the other way around, saying the higher the richness, the higher the inequality. So they were positively related. I mean, you take Darjeeling district in our country, for instance, it's got a very high per capita income, but then who has it? The few, and the rest of them are impoverished. So don't go by the point is that inequality impedes the growth potential. It's not at any point of time that I mean, if, like we always say, if you have a shining India, you have a suffering India as well, and the luminosity of shining India is directly dependent on the degree of the suffering India.
Let me get to Dr. Singh on that point, that no government, and his point being that since you are the ruling government in power, that no government would ever eliminate any subsidy. Mr. Yechury makes the point that why don't you cut that tax being foregone, the government won't do that. When I say about the cost, forget anything else and the critics, etc. The rupee seems to have given a very clear answer to what they feel about the food security bill, and the fact that it does seem to be spiraling out of control. It does seem a loss of confidence in this government's ability to on the fiscal burden of this.
I want to say 3 or 4 things, but let me start with the last point first. I think it's very unfair to load all the ills of our country
Not
on
the
this
food
poor food security bill.
Okay.
I've been hearing the
Just
last
on
3
the
days.
UPA. Okay.
Fortunately for this poor food security bill, the rupee has been in a free fall well before this was about to be passed or was likely to be
No,
passed.
no, but it's dropped to record levels in these 2 days.
And the food
I
security
want
bill
to get back to that.
has been something in the making for quite a long time. Surely even the worst critic of the food security bill will not ascribe the rupee fall on this thing. This may have added a little bit of this or that. But first thing, let's be clear, there are a lot of problems in this country. Distribution problems, other problems. Please don't think that this is a magic wand to even address them, much less solve them. This is an additional feature. It is partly dependent on those structural features which I think on a cause-effect basis will improve. But don't kill this food security bill because this 1 month or 1 week prognosis is the rupee is falling. That can't be the reasoning. There are lots of structural issues in the economy. I think we should address them. We are not all happy. I think the finance minister and the government is most concerned and worried about the free fall of the rupee. And something will have to be done and is being done about it. But you see, this becomes a very large debate there if I start debating the rupee. Secondly, I think we are also going far away from the point because we are now discussing the overall issue of subsidies. Whether this country should have subsidies. And I am reminded that India, being a country this large with so much poverty and inequality, the most right-wing party in India will still be left of the most leftist party of USA. I can guarantee that the BJP or even the Shiv Sena will be to the left of the Democratic Party in USA. Why? Because it's an Indian context we function in. An Indian context you cannot do without welfare measures, because when we talk of inequality, it's not a word, it's numbing poverty at one level equal to one small meal at a 5-star hotel by the rest of the people. So
but why are they increasing rather than getting less?
No, therefore, now the question is, food and poverty are different things. This is a very small part of the problem, food, and let's only restrict to food. I think on the contrary, something very remarkable has been attempted. It is not fully successful yet, very remarkably attempted. In this food security bill, we have actually reduced the quantum to BPL families. I say so, we have reduced it. Why? Because the idea is to make it into one consolidated legislation, increase the coverage to 67%. Although the quantum is somewhat reduced, they get it at cheaper prices. Protect the poorest, the Antodaya, keep the availability and the procurement more or less matching at some 61 million odd tons, and add only a bill of about 23 to 25,000 crores. Now, I think this is a minimalist approach, and it has been managed in a balancing. I mean, it's obviously this balancing has been done because they are conscious of the fact that the country has to afford things as well. Otherwise, it could have been done away, and this balancing has been done very carefully. So, I think that's something to be applauded. And about empowerment, my last point is that, these things take time. I don't think we ever imagined the empowerment which we now have with the RTI Act. We did not imagine. Now, when I go to Rajasthan, I find people who don't know how to, the first word about it, but they know how to get this.
But that's what's being diluted, Dr. Singhvi.
That's a different debate. That's a different debate. In its most diluted form, the RTI is a revolution. In its most diluted form, let me tell you, today.
But that logic
and that empowerment is great. Today, even in Manrega, there is empowerment. I can tell you that in food security bill, it's a culture which takes time to develop. Let us have 5 class actions in a state where you deny food security, or you have a fine imposed on the government officer, or you have a coercive system of the magistrate. You see the sea change. So, but it doesn't happen now.
So the fine is much less, and Chhattisgarh has ESMA, and you all have just 5,000 rupees as a fine in the food security bill.
The fine there is 25.
No, the fine is a small part of it. There is a calumny that goes into your record. There is a appeal. The magistrate can be approached. There are 4 or 5 things, and most important, it comes out of the pocket to pay the food allowance. If you don't give me food, I get a food allowance. So I think that will have an impact.
But I just want to bring in Piyush Goyal, who's been smiling as he's been called left of centre. But Piyush, just to appeal to your right of centre view, when we look at all these schemes and the model of empowerment that we are now seeing, for instance, the new figures that have come out in implementation of Manrega, we've seen that not one state has been able to give 100 days employment according to the records faced.
Similarly in education.
One other worrying aspect is again that in all these schemes that are announced, there's no end date. So for instance, there's no logic that if you deliver or if there is, we find that hunger is reduced by XXX, so then this bill will only last for 10 years or this right will only last for 10 years. How can we function like that? And the point being made by Professor Panagra that no government will resist this tomorrow, even if it's an India government. I doubt that you all will change it. In fact, you all introduced the amendment for no cash transfers, which Professor Panagra is saying that we should have.
I'll just take 3 or 4 things which have come up. One, of course, the revenue foregone which Sitaram talks about. We must have another dialogue on that because that's an issue which has been very much misunderstood in the whole nation, but it really needs to be deliberated. I'm glad the finance minister yesterday did try to elaborate on what that means. I've been asking the government to do that for a long time. As regards the newness, Dr. Singhvi alluded to some newness in this scheme. I have studied it word to word, end to end. There is absolutely no newness. I have a list here of 6 schemes which are budgeted. That's been included, and that figure tallies exactly with an answer that the minister gave in the House. So these 6 schemes have been combined, repackaged, as I said earlier, from an entitlement to a right, to make the person feel that now you have a right, you didn't have it before. The reality is the Essential Commodities Act controlled the availability, the people would get that, and the TPDS made sure that it reached the people. There were problems in implementation in certain states, some did very well, that is there. And the new bill is not doing anything to change that. It's still going to go through the same process. The problem lies in politicizing this issue. If we had not politicized it, all we needed to do was probably look at the TPDS. We needed to look at how that can be made better, implemented better, and the people would have been far better off. I think because it's an election year, we are soon getting into that mode. He's right. No political party can be seen, because we won't be able to reach out to every last man in the village and explain that, look, you're getting nothing new. It's just old wine in a new bottle. Unfortunately, if we had kept the politics out of it, if we had kept the large advertisements out of it, and we had really sat down, all of us with the chief ministers, to address this problem, we could have done far better within the available resources. When my leaders say that the thing should be expanded, I'll explain why. If you have a product available at 3 rupees and at 20 rupees in the same marketplace, it is bound to be misused. We have the Wadhwa committee in Delhi, which showed that the PDS shop earns 3,000 rupees as commission. He can't run a shop earning 3,000, 4,000 rupees as commission. So obviously there's going to be mixing of coarse grain, there's going to be corruption, there's going to be leakage. Even if you do the cash transfer, which Dr. Saab is saying, it's not good enough. People are going to take that cash. We don't know whether they'll buy the food grain for the child or they'll go to have liquor. I think what really is required, if you ask me, is 2 things. Not empowerment by acts. We need to empower them with jobs. If we have to focus as a nation on solving the problem, this can be temporary measures, and for that we didn't need a law. There were already existing mechanisms to provide food grains to the poor. In fact, better so, as Dr. Saab said, it's reduced from 35 to 25. I think what we needed to focus was on clearing up the corruption in the system, the leakages, actually making sure people got it, and we needed to focus on jobs so that more and more people have dignity of life, more and more people can afford to buy a larger variety than rice and wheat alone. They can look at fruits and vegetables, they can look at milk. And the second focus should have been, a good suggestion is made that instead of the corruption in subsidies and fertilizer and all of those things, if we could have moved towards a better yield for the farmers, so improve the quality of seeds, improve the mix of fertilizer. Today we have a situation where the soil quality is just deteriorating because urea is very low price and other fertilizers have shot up by 300%.
Not to mention the water
shortage. I think all parties need to sit down, go beyond politics. Now it's 6 months left, so maybe it will happen after the 2014. But I would think Dr. Singhvi, Yechuri, me, all of us with eminent economists, whether Dr. Panagriya, Amartya Sen or both, we all need to sit down. We need to look composite way how we are going to give people jobs, how we are going to give people food at affordable prices, and see how we can eliminate the corruption in the system. Maybe we need to have these essential food grains at a fixed low price for everybody in the nation. So there can be no corruption in the system. And it will not be very costly. If we provide a decent price to the farmer, if we focus on his yield, can we not double the productivity? We've almost seen some states doubling agricultural productivity in the last 10 years. So that's where the focus of the nation is.
I will hold him to his promise, not before the elections, the run up to the election, but after the elections definitely, that this consensual approach must be there.
Well, it depends.
It will be the ruling party which will have to take the lead, whichever is the ruling party.
No, but
and I'm sure the others will
disagree.
No, but Abhishek, he is actually trying to prove you right.
I'm saying I can't
right in India is more left to the left.
I am saying you can't disagree with
But I just wanted to get in at that point. But anyway, since you linked up the food security bill with the free fall of the rupee, I mean, I think at this rate, if you do that sort of an analysis, you'll also have to extend it further to say that we are really providing leadership to the BRICS countries in the world. Our South African rand has fallen more than the Indian rupee.
But China has appreciated.
No, China, but
that's no argument.
But no, South African rand falling is because of a food bill.
Because
Is that the argument?
But the last...
No, are you trying to say that because of the food bill the Indian rupee is fallen?
No, but the last... let's take the last 2 days since let's say the last 2 days since the food bill is announced. Even the finance ministry didn't expect this fall of the rupee in these last 2 days since the food bill has been passed.
You see, the fall of the rupee and the currencies in a free fall situation is something that has got a lot to do with the international movement of your finance markets. No, you see, it's not all expectations. For instance, let me tell you, supposing there's a lot of surplus that are available with any corporate. I mean, you remember the Prime Minister, Finance Minister calling the CEOs of all the public sector enterprises and saying that you have more than 1 lakh cash surpluses with you. Why are you not investing it? What is the answer they got? We invest and produce what, sir? Where is the market to sell it? There's no global market to sell. Indian market is not expanding. And people with this price rise, I mean, disposable incomes are shrinking. No, where would you invest? If you have the money, you'll have to park it somewhere. Why is the price of gold rising? Why is the price of real estate rising? Why is it being parked in foreign currencies? Because where will you park the money you have? That is a big factor going into the free fall of the rupee. The rupee is being parked in your foreign currencies because there are no investment opportunities here. Now the point is that is where we all have to be looking at. And here I tell you, BJP, Congress has, if you really want to improve our situation, we all have to look at it and how to expand your domestic demand and on that base your growth strategy. World is not going to improve immediately for you to start exporting. You have to empower your and that is empowerment. Empowerment is the economic empowerment of the people. Legal rights, which all that is a minor part of it. The economic empowerment of our people, that is what you have to aim at. Because without that, there is no sustainable growth trajectory at all.
Let's just look at the final round of this dialogue, really, when we identify the kind of India we want to be looking forward. Again, when you look, and you've been a critic of Manrega, etc., but we've seen that rural incomes have risen. You've seen that in government figures of 12, which shows that rural spending power now is almost at par in some levels with urban spending power, how the figures have risen. So there has been an impact of what is seen as so-called welfare schemes, which have been beyond what we've seen in following a particular growth model as well. Or would you agree?
Look, if you're telling me that here are 2 options, Manrega or no Manrega, of course I will take Manrega. There is no doubt.
Really? Okay, that's new.
I have written it. No, it's written in my book. It's written in my book. But why should those 2 be the only options? There are alternatives which will deliver a lot better outcomes. So you can't really judge Manrega by no Manrega. Here is a huge pot of money that you are spending. I want a better outcome for these poor people, not what Manrega is delivering. Number 1. Number 2, on the connection to free fall of the rupee, let us not deny that there is no connection. It's fine, we shouldn't go by that connection, food security bill, or I stand for cash transfers instead. They are for the poor, and if that leads to the fall in the rupee, so be it. But to say that there is no signal in the food security bill, which comes on the heels of rising expenditures over a long period of time, with 9 years of zero reforms, I mean, NDA handed over a flourishing economy growing at 8 or 9% a year in 2003-04 to the UPA government. And what has happened in 9 years? So certainly UPA 1 reaped what NDA had sown. Now UPA 2 is reaping what UPA 1 had sown. And so we are seeing the outcomes.
What's always interesting, the UPA is of course the dual leadership model. So in the one hand there's the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh version model, which I think maybe UPA 1 had slightly more of, and the UPA 2 model, which seems to be the Sonia Gandhi model more.
I personally think,
or at least the last
I personally think that UPA 1 also didn't do very much. It started off, even Prime Minister started off saying that we want reforms with human face, as if reforms that the NDA
had
done.
But what's wrong with that? Surely that's
Wait a minute, reforms did have a human face. Why are you telling me that reforms did have a human face? They are the ones that created jobs. They are the ones that gave revenues that the UPA actually
but the people India Shining hit the BJP. That I think even the BJP would agree with.
Look,
With that,
look, that
they
is-
didn't
that
buy
is
that argument.
Look, that is the
That's
issue of
politics.
what face you put and what politics it is, you know. So maybe politically these guys were not so savvy. But the basic point is that it was the reforms of 10, 12 years that we did consistently that delivered 8% growth for 9 years. Let me just finish, you know. And so in the ultimate, it's great that the UPA started these social programs. We needed to do those. There's no question, of course, but that were made possible by the growth that had happened. But at the same time, when the UPA also stopped doing any of the reforms, we saw the outcome. Growth tanked now. Now, where are we standing here? You think we can really do the right to health in the next 10 years at this pace?
That Dr. Astigri is a valid point, that what you could do with 8% growth, NDA legacy, as Professor Panagra and I'm sure Piyush should agree, you can't do the same with 5% growth.
No, I think Mr. Piyush Goyal will have to rise to the level to which the BJP has been made to rise by Dr. Panagra. I'm not sure he's so supportive of the BJP.
I'm extremely supportive. See, Dr. Singh has an argument which is profound.
Let me
It is
finish.
completely flawed. I'll correct that argument. I know his argument.
Wait, just to take politics out of it, I'm as much an admirer of PV Narasimha Rao, in fact, more of an admirer of Mr.
I know
Rao
you used to be a
than I
big
am
critic of the NDA. I remember it very well.
But now he's an admirer of Mr. Modi's economics. Though interesting, on the FSP,
he does good things. Yeah, he does good things.
On the FSP,
Yes, I have criticized him.
on the FSP, it's not the Mr. Yechury model or the Mr. Singhi model.
I totally agree that on FSB, if Mr. Modi does that, he is actually diluting his own brand. I agree with that.
Mr. Yechury, final
No,
thoughts.
Other, I'll have to come back here. Your choice.
Finally, the point is that all three politicians here refrain from bringing in politics.
We never brought it in.
The professor was more eager to take a political
But maybe
position.
he feels that. He's allowed to feel that.
No, please. Of course, nobody is denying him the right.
No. I have admired both Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee. So don't tell me, I'm not standing for either political party, either in admiration or in criticism.
Yeah, that the reader, that the viewers will know. But the point at issue is that it's not a question of, you see, what are these reforms you're talking of? Honestly, I want an answer. More from the professor than anybody else. 22 years of reforms you've had. When the reforms were initially...
12 years. Last 10 we had none.
That's your opinion, Mr. Panagra. That's your opinion. 22 years since the reform process has begun. When the reform process started, Dr. Manmohan Singh as finance minister said 2.5% of our GDP is the CAD, unbearable. You have to open up. Today it's 4.8%. At that point of time, he said four things for initiating the reforms. That point of time, he said 24% of your debt servicing. 24% of your total revenue earnings is your debt servicing. Today, the figure in the last budget paper is 35.01. Then the third thing he said, the rupee had to be depreciated by 20% in a dual tranche in 1991. Today, the free fall is more than 20%. The fourth thing he said, the inflation is unsustainable, you require reforms, and the inflation is led by rise in prices of essential commodities. Exactly what is happening today. Now, what are these reforms you're talking of? Reforms for what? More greater entry of foreign capital, greater entry of all these things. If that is the reform that is going to result in this after 2 decades, now is that the reform process you want? So let us be, if you want to be serious, I think you have to address serious issues. The serious issues here are the fact of what is the actual economic empowerment of the people of our country. That is what I'm concerned about. I'm not really concerned about what are the levels of your interest, whether the share market is going, where I wish it continues to grow and grow as fast as it can. But the point is that what are these reforms that you're talking of? What as the end result of these reforms? Now, if this is the end result, this is the economic reality today. Now, you can do a tu my, first, Vajpayee government was wonderful. They brought in reforms. Last 10 years, Narasimha Rao, whatever Manmohan Singh government did not do anything. Nobody is going to buy that. In these studios, at that time when India Shining was happening and when we were fighting it out, as to the question posed by the anchor then directly to me was, why are you so against India Shining, Mr. Yechury? I said, shining for whom? Who that anchor was. For a section it may be shining, for a large section it is not. You are creating two Indias. That is the real story of reform. The two Indias, the hiatus between them is widening. That is the real story of reforms. And because of no reforms, if we have not grown, I mean, I find that an amazing statement. This hiatus is growing, and this is the hiatus that is actually slowing down our growth potential. Because that is where economic empowerment of the people becomes the most essential issue. And that is the issue on which I think everybody has to sit down together and do it. It's not a question of a tutu saying you did not do reforms, I did reforms, and therefore this is what has happened. That is not the answer.
I think that word economic empowerment, Piyush, in fact, even as we end, the word economic empowerment is crucial because the difference really is in how we get to that economic empowerment. And Professor Panagra's point that Mr. Modi diluted his brand by in the sense of supporting this FSP as well.
Let me respond to what
I'm just putting this thought out there. Then go ahead.
Manrega, he rightly said Manrega nobody can be against. But could Manrega not be an infrastructure creating program? Why did it not be the road program, the highway, the power plants which Vajpayee did? The reforms are not about FDI. Vajpayee empowered Indian entrepreneurs. He made ease of business better. He allowed Indian entrepreneurs to come in the private sector, in insurance, in banking, in power. He brought in reforms, supplemented with technology and foreign capital in some cases, but largely his reform was focused towards infrastructure creation, private entrepreneurship. The number of Indian entrepreneurs who've come into all these sectors, the telecom revolution, connectivity, road, air, rail connectivity, the connectivity in terms of creating the highway program, the interlinking of rivers which he initiated.
But I don't want to make this to UP versus NDTV. I'm giving both of you sides the benefit of the doubt that both of you have done wonderfully.
Tried to say Vajpayee was not good. I'm just saying,
Piyush, please understand.
High inflation, he inherited high interest. He was able to bring all of it down.
Okay.
What unfortunately has happened is, as Mr. Chidambaram yesterday acknowledged in the economic state of the economy debate, I think around 2008 when the world crisis came, the country lost that direction. The country went in for very high fiscal stimulus, and that could have been infrastructure-led, investment-led, like China did. Now China also did a fiscal stimulus, but they focused on investment. So it was an investment-led growth. We sustained 8, 9, 9, 10 at 9%, which he often quotes, but that was consumption-led, and that money was borrowed and went down the tube. Today's problem of the rupee, by the way, is because of our forex reserves versus external debt.
Yes.
Again, Vajpayee inherited a minus 78 billion external debt relative to the forex reserves. He brought it down to a situation where we had 3 years of current account surplus, and the external debt was less than the forex.
But I want to look ahead, not at the
today,
past.
And today, we've come to a minus 120 in the forex.
Can I just say one
thing? This is the cause of the rupee going
down.
No, now what are we, competing between what Vajpayee did and what
I'm saying the policy, the philosophy.
Hang on. The question is, unfortunately, it was brought in by the professor. But the question right now is, if we're talking of the food bill, if that is the issue, if we're talking of the economic empowerment of the people, let us talk of the future. What you're going to do. The point, Piyush, is that if all that you're saying is true, then either people are fools in 2004. They voted wrongly, or they becoming greater fools now. I'm sorry, I don't have such content for people. I mean, they have the judgment. They have the judgment on the basis of their livelihood, their actual life, not on what we preach that they should think on how their life has improved under so-and-so or not improved. So the point at issue is, we are going in for elections, let the people settle it.
Exactly.
Now here is, if you're talking of the empowerment of our people, now what is best in terms of policy that we can do? What is it that can be improved and what is it that can be done? The food bill, in my opinion, can be further improved even on this particular draft here, which I said, the price can be less, the quantity can be more, the coverage can be more. Perfectly possible, according to me, within
uniform.
It's perfectly possible within the fiscal parameters that we have today. And I don't think this is going to be a waste of going down the drain. And this is going to be the basis for which a healthier population, for me, is a greater contribution.
But there's no change. It's what is already there.
No
cost, no change.
I'm going a step beyond you.
It could have been better.
That's what I'm saying.
It's actually back to square one.
What it is today is a combination of all that, giving a right instead of an entitlement.
That's right.
But it could have gone beyond. I mean, we had that opportunity.
So as I said, the very interesting points of agreement on the left and the right here. But I think we've had a very interesting dialogue from different perspectives. Thank you all very much for joining me tonight. The final arbiter, of course, will be the election. So let's see how that goes. But thank you all very much for joining me tonight. Thank you. Thank you.